condamne la reconnaissance par le président Poutine de Donetsk.
The recognition of President Putin of those territories as independent.
Strongly condemns President Putin's recognition of Donetsk and Luhansk as so-called independent states. This recognition is a violation of Russia's obligations under international law and the Charter of the United Nations. Canada also denounces Russian military actions, including orders to move into Ukraine, which is a clear incursion of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Make no mistake, this is a further invasion of a sovereign state, and it is completely unacceptable. President Putin's speech yesterday was inaccurate and contained dangerous misinformation. Russia's brazen provocations are a threat to security and peace in the world. I've been in constant contact with President Zelensky and our partners and allies since this crisis began. Last Friday, I had a call with President Biden, Prime Minister Johnson, President Macron, Chancellor Scholz, and other European leaders about the situation. And yesterday, I spoke again with President von der Leyen of the European Commission. We are united and steadfast in our support of Ukraine and have made clear that Russian aggression will result in severe consequences. So today, in coordination with allies and like-minded partners, Canada is announcing a first round of economic sanctions. We will ban Canadians from all financial dealings with the so-called independent states of Luhansk and Donetsk. We will sanction members of the Russian parliament who voted for the illegal decision to recognize these so-called republics. We will ban Canadians from engaging in purchases of Russian sovereign debt. And we will apply additional sanctions on 2 state-backed Russian banks and prevent any financial dealings with them. These sanctions are a major step and target those responsible for violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. And they will remain in place until the territorial integrity of Ukraine is restored. Aujourd'hui, en coordination avec nos alliés et partenaires,
in concert with our allies and partners, Canada is announcing the imposition of the first series of economic sanctions. We will ban Canadians from financial transactions with the independent territories, so-called, of Luhansk and Donetsk. We will sanction members of the Russian parliament who voted for the illegal decision to recognize these territories. We will ban Canadians from purchasing Russian sovereign debt and additional sanctions on Russian banks and forbid all financial transactions with them. These sanctions mark an important step and targets those responsible for the loss of territorial integrity and sovereignty in Ukraine, and we will maintain them until the Ukraine.
It is not too late for Russia to seek a diplomatic resolution and re-establish a pathway to peace. But it is also clear that Russian actions violate international law and threaten international peace and security. So today, I am also authorizing a deployment of up to 460 members of the Canadian Armed Forces to Operation Reassurance. This involves more troops to Latvia, as well as the deployment of an additional frigate and maritime patrol aircraft. We're doing this to reinforce our commitment to NATO and promote peace and security in Europe. We're also stepping up our support for NATO. Canada has pledged significant additional medical, aircraft, naval, and land capabilities to the NATO response force. This is something that NATO requested from members and will bolster our support of partners and allies. Minister Anand will provide more details in a moment.
To all members of the armed forces in Latvia, thank you for your great work and continue to help with the values in the region. I also want to talk to Canadians in the Ukraine. Your safety and security are an absolute priority.
Your safety and security are a top priority. Consular services are available in Lviv, and you can reach out to Global Affairs Emergency Watch and Response Center to get support. Their email is sos@international.gc.ca, and phone or messaging numbers are available online. And to the Ukrainian Canadian community here at home, I know the situation is deeply concerning. Your community has made significant contributions to building Canada, and we will stand with you every step of the way. Earlier today, I spoke with the President of the Canadian-Ukrainian Congress and reaffirmed Canada's resolute and ongoing support of Ukraine. Over the
past few years and weeks, Canada has provided important resources to help Ukraine. Since 2015, under the unified mission, the Canadian military trained so many of the Ukrainian troops, and we extended and widened this training mission. We also gave loans to the government going into millions of dollars, and we provided equipment and ammunition that is now in the hands of the Ukrainian army. Canada will continue to be there to support Ukraine and its population.
Flagrant disregard for the independence of a sovereign nation is a serious threat to security and stability in the region and around the world. Canada and our allies will defend democracy. We are taking these actions today to stand against authoritarianism. The people of Ukraine, like all people, must be free to determine their own future. We will continue working with our international partners to safeguard Ukraine's territorial integrity and prevent further Russian aggression. Merci beaucoup. I'm happy now to turn it over to Deputy Prime Minister Freeland.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Let me begin by unequivocally condemning Russia's further invasion of Ukraine. Russia's actions are a violation of international law and of the rules-based international order. Permettez-moi de commencer
to start by condemning this new invasion of Russia into Ukraine. These actions are a violation of international law and international order, rule-based order.
This is an attempt to replace that rules-based international order with a world in which might makes right, where the great powers have the authority to redraw the borders, dictate the foreign policies, and control the governments of sovereign democracies whose only fault is that they are smaller and that their militaries are not as powerful. History tells us that we cannot stand by as a great power attempts to redraw borders and conquer its neighbors. And today is a test of our resolve. That is why Canada has a clear and present stake in this conflict. Today's actions are only the first step. The measures that Canada and our allies have been preparing will be sustained, and they will bite. The economic costs to Russia will be severe. But let me also be very clear. Our quarrel is not with the Russian people. It is with President Vladimir Putin and those around him who are making the choice to threaten a sovereign democracy with subjugation. And it is not too late for Russia to pull back. That would be the right choice for the people of Russia, and for the world. But if Russia does not pull back, it will be met with a firm, united, and sustained response from Canada and our allies. The world's autocrats are watching today to see if our alliance of democracies has the will and the capacity to stand up for the rules-based international order. Canada and our allies are resolute in our defense of that order and of freedom, human rights, and democracy around the world.
The autocrats of the whole world are observing today to see if our democracies have the resolve and the capacity to defend rules-based international order. Canada and its allies are determined to defend this order, as well as freedom, human rights, and democracy.
We know that in standing up for themselves, the people of Ukraine are standing up for democracy and international law. And so we stand with them. Thank you very much. Et je passe maintenant la parole
And I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Mélanie Joly.
Merci, Christian. Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Today and every day, Canada stands with Ukraine and its people. We strongly condemn President Putin's recognition of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent territory and his decision to send troops across the border. This constitutes a clear violation of the Minsk agreements, the UN Charter, and the world order that has protected global security for decades. Canada helped found this order, and we have a role to play in its defense. We are also alarmed by the rhetoric used by President Putin and his revisionist understanding of Ukraine's history and reality. Ukraine is a sovereign country, and President Putin has no right to unilaterally deny its right to exist. We firmly
condemn the recognition of Putin as these territories as independent and sending troops to the Ukraine border. He's ignoring the UN Charter and global security for now decades. Canada is contributing to forming this order and will defend it. We are also alarmed by the rhetoric and of Putin and his revisionist history that he presented yesterday. He cannot deny Ukraine's right to exist.
For world stability in a generation. Russia's actions represent a direct threat to the peace and security of Ukraine and the world. We have worked extremely hard to prevent this escalation through diplomacy and deterrence. But just as Russia has prepared for this day, so have we. Canada and our partners have been clear. The actions of the Russian regime will be met with severe consequences. These reckless and dangerous acts that will endanger the lives of innocent citizens will not go unpunished. Let us be clear, the invasion has started. Our response begins today, and should Russia escalate, so will the cost imposed by Canada and its allies. Nous avons été clairs. Les actions du régime russe auront de graves conséquences.
The actions of the Russian regime will have grave consequences because they are putting the lives of innocent citizens at peril. It has begun. We're responding today. The more Russia intensifies its aggressions, the world will respond.
Today, you've heard the Prime Minister announce our initial sanctions package, targeting first those responsible for this illegal decision, and second, Russian banks. I would like to elaborate on our sanctioning of pillars of the Russian financial system, which includes Russia's central bank, Russia's National Wealth Fund, and Russia's Ministry of Defense. And of course, their ability to continue to fund this crisis. We know that Russia has been building its war chest, but these reserves will not last forever. As the economic pressure mounts from the sanctions imposed by Canada and its allies, Russia will need to seek new funding by leveraging their sovereign debt. We will make it illegal for Canadians to join in that effort, both directly and indirectly. Without a way to recover these costs, the Russian economy will be severely impacted. Let me reiterate, today's measures are just the beginning. As we have said, should Russia further invade Ukraine, it will be met with severe coordinated economic sanctions and increasing pressure if they refuse to change course. Canada's response is ready. We are prepared to target even more of Russia's financial sector and oligarchs, and we're ready to make significant announcements related to Canadian exports to Russia. Vous avez entendu le Premier ministre concernant
You've heard the Prime Minister
les différentes sanctions.
with the different sanctions. Now to elaborate on the Russian pillars of finance in Russia. That includes Russian monetary funds and banks. We know that they have a war chest, but it won't last forever. As pressure rises, thanks to the sanctions imposed by Canada and allies, Russia will have to turn to its sovereign debt for funds, and it will be illegal for Canadians to participate directly or indirectly in this effort. With these problems, the Russian economy will be greatly impacted. I repeat, today's actions are only a beginning. As we've said, if Russia invades Ukraine, it will face severe economic sanctions. We are ready to target Russia's financial sector, and we will make an important announcement on exports to Russia.
Of Foreign Affairs this morning. I spoke to my German counterpart just this afternoon. We commend Germany's decision to suspend the certification of Nord Stream 2. This has been our top priority since the beginning, and we've been resolute in our efforts to reach a diplomatic solution. Russia is responsible for this crisis, a crisis they fabricated through disinformation and manipulation. Let me also be clear to Canadians who are in Ukraine: please leave the country. I want to conclude by saying this important message. The international community will continue to call on Russia to reverse course, withdraw its forces, and choose diplomacy. We'll continue our tireless efforts to achieve a peaceful outcome to this crisis for the people of Ukraine. The door of diplomacy is always open, but the window to do so before innocent lives are put at risk is closing. Thank you. I now pass the floor to my colleague, Anita Anand.
Good afternoon, bon après-midi. Je suis heureuse.
I'm happy to be here today to announce the next phase of our support for the security of Ukraine, Europe, and the world. Yesterday, Russia announced the recognition of so-called independent territories inside the sovereign and international recognized borders of Ukraine and recognized by the UN. This is a flagrant escalation that is unjustified and unacceptable. Since 2014, Russia has illegally occupied Ukrainian territory, and today there are more 150,000 Russians in Ukraine.
NATO, the alliance that has underpinned the rules-based international order that has kept us safe since the end of World War II, is being tested. Much to Mr. Putin's dismay, however, NATO is more unified than ever before. I've just finished a productive meeting of NATO defense ministers in Belgium and additional meetings at the Munich Security Conference, where I met with partners and allies from across the alliance, and I witnessed and felt this resolve. I can say without hesitation that our alliance shares a common commitment to defending the rules-based international order. During my time in Europe, I heard over and over again that our allies want more of what Canada has to offer, and that is exactly what we are providing today. We are announcing the authorization of up to 460 additional Canadian Armed Forces personnel under Operation Reassurance. This includes a significant bolstering of Canada's presence in Latvia, where we lead NATO's Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group. With 540 personnel at the current time, we will deploy an artillery battery of up to 120 personnel in the coming weeks. In Brussels,
I met the ministers of defense of 10 countries that continue to, and they represent a third of our alliance in NATO. This makes a real difference and is testimony to the deep commitment of Canada in NATO and Europe.
Announcing the deployment of an additional frigate, HMCS Halifax, under a NATO flag to complement Canada's current contribution to NATO's Standing Maritime Group 2. We will also provide a maritime patrol aircraft to bolster NATO forces in the Euro-Atlantic area. Today, I can also confirm that Canada has made a second delivery of lethal aid to Ukraine, and we will continue to support our Ukrainian partners as they defend their sovereignty.
In this crucial time, Canada's commitment to rules-based international order is stronger than ever.
Alongside our NATO allies in defense of transatlantic security at this important time. Merci beaucoup, Miigwech. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Annan. We will be taking 20 minutes of questions, starting with reporters in the room. One question, one follow-up. 20 minutes de questions, en commençant dans la salle. Une question, une sous-question. Radio-Canada, c'est à vous.
Monsieur Trudeau, Madeleine Blais-Morin.
President Putin was well aware of the threat of sanctions, and they didn't stop annexation of the Crimea. What do you think is different this time? First, it's absolutely unacceptable that Russia has once again invaded Ukraine. And I think that, indeed, we've been talking about sanctions if it happened, and we're imposing them. It will impose more if there's more violence or invasion, but I think Putin may have underestimated the firmness of the response of the international common allies, democracies in the West, but other countries in the world too, that are witnessing this violation of international law. They view it as a threat not only to the sovereignty of Ukraine, but of all countries around the world. And this firm, united response around the world will end up costing Putin very dearly. Have you decided that diplomacy was a failure? No, our diplomatic approaches continue to try and resolve this situation. We will always try to find diplomatic solutions to these violent acts, but we will also demonstrate our firmness and resolve, our deep choice to always defend democracies.
Next question.
Hi, Prime Minister Tom Farry, CBC. Vladimir Putin has clearly taken sanctions into account in his calculations on Ukraine. So I'm wondering what makes you think any of this will be effective? And if it's not, what more can Canada and its allies do?
We know that the impact of these decisions that Canada is making, but also that our allies are making, are going to have real feelings, real impacts on the Russian people and on the Russian economy. Highlighting, for example, Germany's suspension of Nord Stream 2, which was going to be a significant source of revenue for the Russian state and Russian Federation. These are things that are going to make a significant difference. As Deputy Prime Minister Freeland said, our issue is not with the Russian people. Our issue is with Vladimir Putin and his decision to unilaterally violate the rule of law, the international rules-based order, and the sovereignty of the independent nation of Ukraine.
You say that your quarrel is not with the Russian people, but I'm wondering what the goal of these sanctions is then. Is it to turn Putin's inner circle against them? Is it to turn the Russian people against them? And you noted that you're sending more lethal aid. Are you trying to make this as costly to Russia as possible, not just in money, but in casualties?
I think as we see a rise of authoritarianism around the world, as we see challenges increasingly to democracies, to democratic principles, we need to all stand strong in defense of those values and principles. And if Putin thinks it is in his interest to invade another sovereign country, we have to demonstrate to him that it is not in his interest, that he will not come through this better or stronger, that this is harming Russia. And quite frankly, to see the impact on Ukrainian families, to see the fear, to see and to hopefully not see the violence that could be coming in the coming days as Russian troops further invade Ukraine, that will be costly, not just in terms of financial impacts, but in terms of lost lives, in terms of lost credibility for Vladimir Putin, and loss of stature for Russia that has shown that it is completely willing to ignore the principles and values of the United Nations that has kept our world remarkably peaceful for over 70 years.
Next question.
Mia Rabson from the Canadian Press. There are some who'd been asking for additional troops for quite a while before today as a deterrence measure. Why did we wait until now to do this?
We continue to be strong contributors to NATO. We continue to lead the enhanced forward presence in Latvia. We continue to be committed and engaged in many operations like Operation Reassurance. Today, we're announcing that we're willing to do even more. I think one of the things that we have seen with Putin's demands around Ukraine and NATO presence, that far from seeing a reduction of Western forces in Eastern Europe, Vladimir Putin has achieved the opposite. And countries like Canada and all our NATO allies are looking at reinforcing our presence in Eastern Europe to demonstrate that these actions by Russia are absolutely unacceptable.
You've said that you're prepared to do more if this doesn't work, but what are you looking for from Russia to decide that you're not going to up what we're doing?
We are looking for Russia to stand down, to cease its violation of Ukrainian sovereignty, Ukrainian territorial integrity, to return to the diplomatic negotiation tables instead of tossing the Minsk agreement out the window as they chose to invade a sovereign, independent nation. Russia needs to stand down. It needs to understand that there are consequences for a country that chooses to use force, to violate fundamental precepts of international law that has kept our world remarkably stable for many, many decades. This is something that the entire world needs to stand together with, and Canada and its allies will stand up not just for our friends in Ukraine, but for the values and principles of democracy.
Merci. On va maintenant passer au téléphone.
We'll now go to the
c'est à vous.
phones. Operator?
Please press star one at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. Et la première question, the first question is from Ryan Tumilty, National Post. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. I'm wondering on the Emergencies Act, the streets in Ottawa are clear today of protesters. I'm wondering, the Emergencies Act talks about an ongoing emergency. When do you feel that this emergency will have ended and allow you to revoke the act?
As I said yesterday, this act was brought in because of an emergency, but it is proportional, it is scalable, it is time-limited and specific. Every day, we receive information and briefings and analyze whether it continues to be needed, and we are looking to lift it as soon as possible. That decision will be made at the appropriate moment.
Following up.
Yeah, sir, I'm just wondering if you can be more specific. This is a huge piece of federal legislation meant to be used lightly. What is your threshold for removing it if it's not the clearing of border blockades and the streets in Ottawa?
That is exactly what we are looking at every single day as we analyze reports come in from across the country, as we hear the recommendations and operational issues faced by police agencies across the country and intelligence services. As I said many times, we do not want this Emergencies Act to be in place for a day longer than necessary, and we are looking very carefully every step of the way as to when it can be lifted. It was always reasonable, proportional, entirely subject to Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and specific and time-limited in its application. We continue to reevaluate to see when it will no longer be necessary.
Opérateur, prochaine question.
Operator, next question.
The next question, la prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse.
From La Presse.
Merci, bonjour. La question est soit pour M. Trudeau, soit pour Mme Anand
Either
concernant le
Prime Minister or Ms. Anand. For the deployment, are there troops still left in Kyiv? And before the reassurance mission in Latvia, was the objective, has the goal of the mission changed? Might the troops be engaged in something other? Thank you, Melanie. The Operation Unify, which is a training mission that's been going on for some time in the Ukraine, is obviously suspended right now. There's no training happening in Ukraine right now. And the great majority of the unified soldiers have left the Ukraine, but I'll turn it over to Ms. Anand for more detail.
Bonjour,
hello, Melanie. First, as I said, or already said, the safety and security of the Canadian Armed Forces are, of course, my priority. The Unified operation is an important training mission, as the Prime Minister has said up till now, but it's temporarily shut down for now, and most are not in the Ukraine at this time, just in Europe. There are a few soldiers in Ukraine to support the embassy there, and we will make decisions on this subject in the coming days and weeks. With the reassurance operation, as you know, this is another bigger mission to support the NATO Western Plan, and today's announcement means that we will send several troops to this region. And I think it's needed to strengthen the Western allies and NATO, but also to make sure that we will make our contribution to the NATO alliance. It's very important. I was in Europe last week, and I heard our partners there, and we're in agreement everywhere throughout NATO that we need to do our part to strengthen NATO, our allies and partners there, for European stability and the sovereignty of the Ukraine, and we are there for our partners and our allies too. Thank you.
En suivi, Mélanie?
Follow up, Melanie? It's not very clear. I think the goal of the mission is the same, so there's no combat as such. But my other question, the Russian ambassador, has the Russian embassy replied to you? And why wait so long before opening a channel of communication when it was always open between Canada and Ukraine? The reassurance operation presently in Latvia is there to indicate that NATO remains resolved on protecting the sovereignty of Eastern Europe countries, particularly NATO partners. And we will continue with this mission with increased presence, but the mission remains the same. With regard to diplomacy, I will turn it over to Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly. Thank you. First, Canada is in communication with my colleague. It's been open since I met him in December, and at the time I raised concerns with regard to the presence of Russia in Ukraine. So that's the first point. Second point, today I gave instructions to my deputy minister to meet the Russian ambassador in Canada to explain very clearly Canada's position with regard to the recognition of those two territories as independent.
We'll take one last question on the phone.
Thank you. La question suivante. The next question is from Stephen Chase from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Question is about our embassy staff in Lviv, and are they still operating there, and how long are they going to operate there, or have you started removing them?
We, a number of weeks ago, started to scale down our presence in Ukraine for the protection of Canadians and Canadian consular services and families. Consular services continue, including a embassy staff in Lviv, but those decisions will be made day by day as to how long our ambassador stays there and the small staff she has around her. But I'll turn to, again, Minister of Foreign Affairs for further clarification on that.
Thank you, Steve. So there are members of Global Affairs Canada and our head of mission. Our ambassador is indeed in Lviv. They are also along other countries, including the UK and the US, which is also in Lviv. We decided to move our operations from Kiev to Lviv a couple of days ago, and that was for security reasons. But the goal was to stay in Ukraine as long as possible. We think it is important that we be there to offer consular services. And meanwhile, our advice to Ukrainian Canadians is clear. If you're in Ukraine, please leave now. Thank you.
Following up.
Yeah, the second question is about the 460 number. And my question is, how much of this this number will be going to Latvia, and I assume the rest is you're just counting the people on the frigate and the people on the plane, which I assume is an Aurora.
Hi, Steve. Let me lay it out for you. An artillery battery of about 120 people, that is, will be the first element to deploy in 30 days for approximately 6 weeks. That congregation of people will be drawn from bases across the country. The large tranche of the 460 is going to be placed and part of the HMCS Halifax, as you suggested in your question, that will be deployed in March, towards the last part of March. And finally, the CP-140 Maritime Patrol aircraft will also have a contingent of that 460. So you can see that we are dividing up the contingent of 460 across these 3 different items. Thank you.
Thank you all. This is what ends today's press conference. C'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.